I am exploring assisted euthanasia where it's legal in the Netherlands because I was diagnosed with chronic bipolar disorder when I was 16.
So is part of this process of you making it so public and putting yourself out there and sharing your message with the world and seeking validation?
No, I don't know if I'm interested in continuing to exist as a human being. I'm honestly not sure.
It's your body, it's your life. You can do whatever you want, though my compassionate side would hope that someone wouldn't make this decision. But the fact is, these options exist. Bringing awareness to it can be, okay, is this person promoting it for other people to make the same decision?
I really want to drive a point home, which is super critical.
So Joseph, remind me where you are right now?
Amsterdam in the Netherlands.
I was just in Amsterdam in, what was it, September or end of July? I was in Amsterdam for the third time. I stayed in De Pijp. I don't like staying in the inner city so much. I know that's pretty close, but I usually stay on the outskirts. I think it's such a beautiful city.
Yeah, it's very charming. Very, very charming.
Very charming. Charming is a good word. I think that's exactly what I felt every time I've gone there. And so, Joseph, if you don't mind introducing yourself, I guess we'll just kind of rock and roll and just try to have this conversation, or we'll have this conversation rather. I found you online. I want you to correct me to make sure I have all the information right and whatnot. But would you introduce yourself and tell little people, who the hell you are?
Yeah, sure. And, using an economy of words, I'm 28-year-old West African by origin writer. I was born in London. I'm a contemporary artist. I'm a writer. I have obviously found myself at a very complex period in my life where I am exploring assisted euthanasia where it's legal in the Netherlands because I was diagnosed with chronic bipolar disorder when I was 16. I always feel weird speaking about myself because I find it so self-aggrandizing. But I think at the end of the day, yeah, I'm just a person sort of taking the steps towards, also trying to meaningfully normalize difficult and complex discussions around mental health, especially men's mental health, because I think that gets sidetracked a lot. So that's all I'll say about myself, I think.
Yeah, I'm sure. I appreciate you sharing that. There's a lot you said there that I want to tap into, but specifically the men's mental health. That's a big component of what I believe as well. And, I've noticed through my podcast, the heavy set of my audience is women. I think it's most of the time 65 to 70% of women with this podcast, which tends to be a lot about mental health. It's not just grief. It's a whole smorgasbord of feelings and what's going on in people's heads and what we have. And it tends to be women. And, it's a cliche for a reason. For whatever reason, men just have to feel they have to be stoic. You can't express it.
I think statistically, I'm not surprised because most men only achieve or experience true intimacy within the context of sex. Beyond that, very few men know what it means to have or achieve intimacy. And it was so funny. For example, my housemate turned 40 recently, and I got him a bouquet of flowers. Obviously it was garbed in black paper, but I got him a bouquet of flowers and some natural wine because I didn't think he'd sort of gotten flowers in that capacity prior to that. And yeah, I think that men just don't really. We don't live in a society that enables men to get to know themselves beyond roles, and intimacy is normally limited to like I said, sex. So it's kind of sad, I think.
I think it is too, especially as I've gotten older, I've realized the importance of that. Not that I was, a sex addict or anything like that. I'm not, but in regards to me always searching for this intimacy, not searching, just I would love that intimacy. And in regards to that intimacy, it always correlates to this level of communication. And to me, it wasn't always just a physical manifestation, which is part of it. But at the same time, this willingness to just be myself, just to fully be myself and let it all out, to me, is the highest level of intimacy. And that's being vulnerable at the same time. So the fact that you're willing to be vulnerable and have this conversation with me is massive, especially in your case. And so just to clarify, is it proper to call it assisted suicide? Because I know assisted euthanasia is there's the proper term, but I also hear assisted suicide being thrown around. But does that dilute the term at all?
I mean, to some extent, it is assisted suicide, but euthanasia is the more correct term, I would think. I mean, I I find it, you know, I find the obsession around terminology quite interesting when it comes to euthanasia, because obviously it's still a very controversial thing in the Netherlands, even though it's legal. I mean, medical practitioners don't encourage it, and that's why it's such a bureaucratic, long path. But yeah, that's what I would say. It is euthanasia, even though that word is censored on Instagram, by the way, and censored in many places.
Yeah, the whole censorship in regards to specific words like that, when it's the reality, when you're someone going through this right now, I don't understand it. I mean, I partially understand a direction as to why, but I don't agree with it. And that's why I think this conversation is so
Neither
important.
do I. I've had my best friend and I call it, the Instagram jailhouse. I've been in and out of it for the use of certain words. And it's so obvious because you see it in my reach within a certain period of time before I go out of it and then it recovers. I'm back to the numbers I was, which is such a silly thing anyway as far as the algorithm. But yeah, I do find that in this context, while I understand the importance of the algorithm to protect, um, you know, impressionable young people from harmful content, at the end of the day, like censorship of the, sorry, it's a tongue twister, of the actual word in of itself, I think doesn't entirely help, and it sort of like it sort of reinforces that element of it being a taboo. And I think that's what I find arguably problematic about it, at the end of the day.
Yeah, and I agree, and that's why we're here. And off the rip, it's I don't know you. I've seen you online, and when I first heard you talking about it, I did honestly have a mixed conception or perspective of what you were doing. Of course, first of all, it was my first thought is understanding why, and also flipped with the idea of, well, now getting to talk to you for only a few minutes at this point, like off the rip, it's like, okay, this guy is clearly intelligent. He seems like you seem like such a sweetheart, and it's a ripple of, wow, we truly never know what anyone's going through. And I just want to understand and explain what you're going through, if you're willing to share, as to why you would even consider a decision like this.
Yeah, thanks for asking. Thanks for all the kind words. I mean, yeah, again, I'll try and keep it as concise as possible while being meaningful and intentional about what I'm saying. I've struggled with treatment-resistant bipolar disorder for over a decade now, and I think at the end of the day, the exacerbation of my circumstance combined with the sense of strain or stress that I get from my chemical imbalance or the neurological pain I endure almost every morning, has really been a fatiguing battle. I know people think that at the end of the day, there is a defeatism that's tied to, there's a sense of like defeatism that's tied to euthanasia and choosing this path. But actually, I see it more as a form of self-mercy, to be able to say that I've really like tried my best to like navigate this thing. I'm open to other solutions, but I think that because the process of achieving assisted euthanasia is so bureaucratic and evaluation based, because you have to get approved, before you get a date. I thought that was a path I wanted to pursue, and I think also for me, I'm a gay man who was born in London but is fully Ghanaian. Only have a Ghanaian passport. So that means I belong to a country where my sexual orientation is criminalized to some extent, and in a place where I can't fully take stock of my life. So being an immigrant, and all the other things that comes with existing, that one struggles with, simply exacerbates what goes on in here, I think. And look, I'm not how do I say this? I think we're all essentially victims of something, right? I think we are all essentially victims of something, and so at the end of the day, I'm not playing any small violence for myself. I'm just saying that, look, I think life as a phenomenon in of itself is beautiful. It's worth living, but I think that I don't know if I want to, like, you know, I'm categorically certain that mine at this point is too much. You know, the seething pain that I go through is far outweighs the moments of joy that do happen, and that's sort of what led me to that decision.
All right. Well, thank you for sharing that. That gives us a lot more. It gives me personally, again, I obviously was sharing this with the audience, but this is a conversation between us, and it gives a lot more context. And again, back to the idea of you don't know what everyone's going through, and a lot of people are. Everyone's going through something. In regards to this process of you deciding to make this obviously big decision, what goes through your head outside of what you just explained? Like, what are you weighing back and forth between staying alive and doing this assisted euthanasia?
I think at the end of the day, I'm always sort of trying to consider, like, what I really want at the end of the day, and I think that's really just to have, like, non-violent peace and relief. That's honestly what it is. It's. I've spoken to, like, hundreds of people. I've had the privilege of speaking to hundreds of people who have either taken their daughter or a friend to get euthanized when the date came, after the bureaucracy of a year or two. I've spoken to people who changed their minds. I've spoken to people who have themselves present continuously, fulfilled that journey, and are left with a few months. I spoke to a lovely guy who on Saturday who is a tree surgeon. I believe it's called an arborist or arborist. Or an arborist, sorry, a tree surgeon who basically, after 4 years, is in the final months leading up to where he will be euthanized in the Ardennen forest in Belgium by lethal injection. After going by the doctor that gave birth, that sort of gave birth to him, essentially, or facilitated his birth, is what I mean. So that was another really beautiful, unique story, and the fact that it took him 4 years versus others where it takes 1 to 2 was also quite interesting. So I think it's just seeking that relief, and I think that's the conflict. That I guess I wouldn't say one goes through necessarily, but one's external elements like friends and family sort of go through, because I think your feelings are constantly being invalidated. Not even I would even say feelings, because that sounds a bit frivolous. Your lived experience is constantly being invalidated because people are wondering if it's really that bad, or if, because one looks so well adjusted and put together and sort of sane. But I think people don't really understand the you know the mental fatigue that goes into becoming this every day. The guy I spoke to, the tree surgeon, suffers from CPTSD, complex PTSD, and he as well looked very soft-spoken, very kind, very well put together. But there was definitely you could tell, because I obviously anyone who's suffered chronic mental disorders can tell that there was definitely a war in his mind that he just really, really wanted to put an end, and I can definitely understand that.
Understood. So is part of this process of you making it so public and putting yourself out there and sharing your message with the world and seeking validation?
No. The reason why I've been doing this is painfully simple. And no matter what anyone thinks or projects, this is what it is. My Instagram, two things. My Instagram is a public diary. It's a public scrapbook. It is not a human right. People don't have to consume my Instagram. People don't have to consume my Substack. These are not necessities. So it's there. It exists. If you want to look at it, do. If you don't. Whatever the algorithm does is what the algorithm does, but it's not, obligatory. It's just my way of documenting my life. So that's the first thing. The second thing I would say at the end of the day is, if the only thing I achieve, as you know, statistically, as you may or may not know, over 60,000 people have already ended their lives violently just 29 days into the new year. One of them being, one of my favorite indie film directors, Jeff Bainer, Aubrey Plaza's husband. And One of them actually being, I wouldn't say his name, just out of respect for his family, but one of them being a dear friend of mine who died 3 weeks ago at 24, a month before starting his podcast. And again, these are white men, by the way, who come from arguably privileged backgrounds. You know, the latter I obviously knew personally, and I just want to normalize complex conversations around chronic mental disorders. That's it. The reason for making my process and my journey public is to push the needle forward by even a millimeter on pertinent discussions that need to happen regarding chronic mental disorders, because I think there is still huge public misconception around what that looks like, around what that is, around the effects it has on people, and I think that's what my page is, and only being able to use my story as the conduit simply because it's mine, and I can't use any, and I don't know, I wouldn't know how to use anybody else's. So I chose to use mine at the detrimental risk of it being ridiculed, mocked, maligned, attacked, da 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 da. But that's okay. I guess I understand every single sort of put backlash and support that comes from doing so. I don't care about either. I just care about having the conversation, like making sure that the conversation is had. That's what I care about. So those are the only two reasons why my page exists. If any of those two reasons didn't, when necessary, I wouldn't have a page, and I wouldn't be doing this publicly.
Understood. Again, that gives so much clarity on the point because all the optics, if you will, can look at it in two ways. Okay, or a few ways actually. Two ways that you just explained, which is why I wanted to clear the air and understand where you're coming from, because it doesn't matter what I think, what other people think, because only you are having that experience. And that's why I wanted to hear from you and hopefully share this story. It doesn't get censored because of certain words that we have to use, because I do think this conversation is important because you're not alone. Even though I feel like I can't relate to what's going on in your head, I can never understand or truly feel what you're feeling. All I can do is have this conversation and to parlay with what your explanation is. Some people may look at it, and even off the bat, to me, be honest, it's like, okay, why is this guy just sharing this? Because it's just promoting what he's trying to do, or is it just his personal experience, what you're explaining, and you're sharing it because there's millions of other people maybe feeling the exact same thing. But even within those people that I feel like you're not alone, but you could feel like you're so alone because it's your personal experience. So the power of sharing your story can hopefully help other people in a sense that I may be thinking the same thing, but I don't have the right word for it. I don't want to say dangerous, because my personal opinion is if someone has to make a decision like this, that's your decision. And I think it's your body, it's your life. You can do whatever you want, though my compassionate side would hope that someone wouldn't make this decision. But the fact is, these options as assisted euthanasia exists. So bringing awareness to it can be, okay, is this person promoting it for other people to make the same decision?
Yeah, but I really want to drive a point home, which is super critical. Assisted euthanasia is preventative by nature because it requires evaluations. It is the 29th of January, I believe, and over 60,000 people have violently killed themselves. I find it very confusing sometimes, and I mean, maybe it's human nature, maybe it's vibes, but I find it very confusing how people completely ignore the fact that over 60K people have violently off themselves, this year, and that somebody who's doing it transparently and wants to do it non-violently, giving their family and friends closure, is the one being maligned. And I think maybe that the idea is that once somebody has done it, it's like there's more. There's more, I guess. There's more public mercy in retrospect because it's already happened. But I think that the reason why I'm harpooning on the 60K number and that statistic is because even though it is small relative to the 8 billion of us, it is still quite alarming, objectively, and I think that needs to be sort of like addressed. And so, and also the use of the word promoting. When people say promoting, I get very confused. In fact, I get very confused by two things that I've been told by a loud minority of people. Number one, um, Instagram is part of an attention economy. So whether someone is posting a 2 a.m. thirst trap, a meal prep, or just plain out talking about, you know, life as they see it. It is by instinct promotional. Yeah, so I find the point, the single outing of me just posting consistently to be promotional, a bit to be missing the point, because isn't all content on Instagram promotional? You know,
Yep.
unless it's a Finsta, and even then, unless it's like entirely private, right? But other than that, I don't really get, and then the second thing I'll say before I yield the floor is, this I've been accused of, or people have said that I've romanticized. I'm sort of romanticizing suicide. Again, I find that very confusing. I see the world in a certain way. I think what they're trying to say is that the videos are beautiful, and they don't understand why it should be this way. um, but unfortunately, my eye, I'm an artist, so as far as my eye for composition and elements in my work, I'm never gonna take a deliberately bad camera angle of anything, because it's just the way I see the world. It's not, and if it happen, and if I choose certain songs over my videos that I find meaningful and nostalgic to a period of my life, and it looks good, or as one would say, romantic. That's just the way I see the world. It doesn't take away from um the so-called seductive nature of the content I create, if we need to call it that. It has nothing to do with encouraging people to follow my path. Because, mind you as well, given the stats I've provided, if people want to find harmful data to like off themselves, I don't think my Instagram will even be page number like 2085 of where they look to find violent content. It's my Instagram is just simply a requiem of my life, and the way I see the world, and just being honest about my journey. That's basically it.
I love that, and this is why we're talking, baby. This is why we're
Yeah.
talking. And I think the that important highlight of the amount of people that do end their life. That's a reality, and people do it, and often at times it's the way I see it. I had this conversation with my friend Alyssa. I believe we spoke about it a little bit. I was like, this path, though, may be quote unquote controversial. People are doing it at record numbers, it seems like, at this point, and it's in such a more traumatic manner because it's not as prepped, if you will. And that's where I kind of understand, correct me if I'm wrong, that preventative measure, because it does leave a little bit of a buffer. Maybe it opens the doors for conversations with people in your life, because you are bringing it up, when often the times when it comes to someone making this decision on their own, it's a snap of the finger and they didn't see it coming, or maybe they saw it coming, but then he just made the decision. So I can see the reciprocal nature of this being preventative because of that bureaucratic process, and it's not happening immediately. There's more discussion. There's maybe more families can get involved and have an open dialogue
Yeah, and
to
also,
prevent this.
yeah, and also you're so right because the didn't see it coming statement makes my blood flammable. It really does irk me, because there's so many like amazing campaigns. There's even like this amazing ad- advertisement um about two friends who go to a football game consistently over a period. One seems more docile and morbid and um sunken. The other is always seems more lively, and the one seem and active. And they sort of do a sort of a carousel of like the different games they go to. And then in the last frame, the one who was lively and energetic, his chair is empty because he's offed himself, is the implication. And the one who was docile and calm and almost morbid lived. And the ad ended by saying that, something along the lines of, "It's never who you think it is." And so but still, an ad is an ad is an ad. I think people still think that there is and don't get me wrong, sometimes there are signs of like melancholia and people who are prone to, but the person you have to worry about the most is the class clown.
Yeah, I found that within my own life, and even if you look at celebrities that I've had that have taken this path, it's almost like it's a projection.
Right?
Is that correct? It's like,
Robin Williams, for
yeah.
example, being the most, I guess, known example in that capacity. Like, yeah, like of that quote. Like, always, like sometimes the one you should be worrying about is the class clown, the one who's always trying to make everyone happy.
Right. It's like what are they covering up? And then if anything, that should be a sign to really check in with people. And all this conversation is for me is to see in your eyes, because everyone can make an assumption, everyone can make a judgment based on looking at their phone. But unless we dig into the truth as to what you are feeling, we'll never understand. And that extrapolates to everyone's life. Because we get so easy to judge and think we understand from our puny little lens that has no relation to what someone else is going through. And this hopefully will create dialogue to others feeling the same way. And it's to me, this is such an important conversation. I'm not ending the episode. I feel like this is a thank you. It should be at the end, but this is just a conversation that should be having more. And hopefully this opens the doors and eyes of other people just to take a second and try to understand without fully understanding what this person sees, as opposed to looking at it from our own lens.
No, I appreciate that, because I really, at the end of the day, I think somebody asked me, is my work about awareness? And I said, awareness is a cute word, but actually, I want to go beyond awareness. I'm super dedicated to the normalization of these discussions, because awareness is a very othering term sometimes. Awareness sounds like it sounds like a very charitable word, like um but I really, what I'm advocating for goes beyond that. It's for the normalization, the radical normalization of these complex discussions about like chronic mental disorders that people just face, and why we need to have these conversations, so that people don't feel as if they have no escape route, and that as much of the shame and the rot that comes with the shame can be taken out of what is still to this day deemed somewhat like to be a taboo topic, and that's what I'm trying to do every day with my story.
I know this is a very convoluted, multi-layered, maybe question or statement, but because everyone's experience is different in many ways, there's not one answer that, I'm not even sure you found, but have you found this discussion and normalizing this topic by opening up your story having helped other people already?
I have gotten hundreds of messages of people who have said that, my transparency has transformed their perspective on it, has given them more empathy for a relative, has allowed them to also seek help themselves, has made them want to cling to life more, because they see me at last suppers with different people and living my life in a very open and honest way. So I've been inundated with so many positive messages about people who this truth of mine has been liberating, and that beyond goosebumps and sensations, that does make me feel like a very warm feeling that, at least in my pain, I'm allowing people, or giving people permission to be more of who they are. And that's what you want as a human being, existing and learning and growing in life.
And what about you? Has this process of sharing your memoir, if you will, your own personal story, and helping others, has that ratified your decision to choose this path?
I mean, I think that I am humbled to the chance that I will learn more about myself through this process. I think at the same time as well, I've come to realize that, this wasn't supposed to go this way, right? I was supposed to, when I asked people to invite me to dinner, I really thought I would be bullied and maligned, and that like it would be a brain fart of nothingness, and people would just ignore my genuine desire to connect this way. Because obviously, starting the Last Supper Project was based on the Harvard study of adult development from 1938, which showed that it wasn't wealth, it wasn't health, but it was in fact human relationships and connection that fostered happiness, or a benchmark for happiness. And I think for me, that's what this has come to. It's been me being surprised by the over 2,500 people who have invited me to break bread with them. And having my Calendly filled up to August 2025 when it was made available to, that has opened my eyes to a lot of things. I mean, it doesn't change my pain, doesn't change the struggle I still ubiquitously live with when it comes to like my debilitating bipolar disorder and that chronic affliction, but it does give me some sense of curiosity and, dare I say it, hope about humanity. It doesn't have to be about my life. I also love this opportunity to like decenter myself. There was this neurological, I think it's a term called sonder,
Mm.
and which is sort of like the epiphany or the realization that everyone's life, each bystander's life is equally as complex and as nuanced as yours is. And I love entering people's lives as they invite me and to decenter myself and see that I am also a part of their day as much as they are a part of mine. And it's been a beautiful experience, sort of like, bear witness to that, in real time.
So, yeah, you just kind of gave me the chills specifically using the word sonder, because I think I made some posts, not even thinking about it. I think about things quite often, as everyone does, but sometimes I put it out there, and I apparently defined the word sonder without knowing what the word sonder was. Someone messaged me, was like, "Oh, you're sondering." I'm like, "What the hell is sondering?" And then I Googled it and I was like, "Oh, I'm sondering." And then it does put you in the shoes of other people. And I think that is such an important thing. And you may never truly, you're not going to feel with what someone else is feeling. Some people may be empathetic, but it still puts you in a place of a perspective shift to at least understand in a compassionate way, and it will mitigate any negative.
Exactly. It's the acknowledgement that
Yes.
as just as your life is filled with convolution and strain and joy and pain, somebody else's life in equal convolution is also occurring. And that is a very humbling thing to sort of like live. And that's what the Last Supper Project has taught me even more.
Yeah, sometimes I feel like, again, I wouldn't know, you could tell me, but I feel like that sometimes that acknowledgement is all people need.
Exactly. But also to know that the acknowledgement is more for yourself than it is for other people. Because once you acknowledge that within yourself, it informs the way you treat other people. Suddenly
Mm.
everything, there's this zillennial statement of like main character energy.
Mhm.
And Sonder is the opposite of that. Sonder is the embodiment of truly appreciating that you may just be an extra in other people's lives, and that's also okay, and that's fantastic. So you try and be the best extra you can be, and that not everything you speak about when somebody brings it up has to do with its correlation to you. Because we build castles in our heads, and sometimes we have to get ourselves out of that.
Yeah, and I love that analogy because there's a reason why all these $100 million films have extras. Imagine a movie without extras. It'd be weird as hell if you saw Bruce Willis jumping from a building and no one else was there. So even the role may seem insignificant, it all plays a role together. And whether you're a background or you live this grandiose life as the main character, it all works as one ecosystem. And I want that message to realize that you may not be as quote unquote significant on the main screen, but everyone has a significance, and I just hope that people can find that, because again, I just met you, and I hope I get a chance to meet you in person. And it's, at the end of the day, it is your decision. Obviously, I'm not here to change your mind. I'm here to have this conversation by sharing your story. But I feel like I personally don't think the world will be a better place without you. And
Very kind.
and it's fascinating to see what you're doing, because if you are having impacts on other people, then to me that'd be like, okay, well, hopefully that does continue to give you hope, and you are making an impact. And maybe this is just a temporary journey to make this decision throughout this bureaucratic process and maybe reconsider things. But this is a truly profound moment to talk to someone like you. And I do want to ask you another question, because I didn't clarify whether you have family or what's going on in your inner circle, but what are those dialogues with your friends and family in regards to a potential decision of taking assisted
I mean,
euthanasia?
it's a great question. I'll start by saying very very quickly that my relationship with my family is very very complex and has always been. And I probably want to talk about that as little as possible, because it has the minutiae and the nuance and the layering of many years of I grew up in a Catholic family. I came out as gay. I named my rapist, followed by two other brave African American men who named the same abuser. I chose a different path from my family, which was not in finance. Um, Um, yeah, even the decision to like coming from a very religious family, coming forward about wanting to pursue euthanasia, and it's been tough. It's been so tough, and I think my friends. Oh God, I think my when I've had friends who've chosen to hold space for my pain and have still been able to share their what they deem to be their selfish desires for me to keep living, which is understandable, and I can't be angry about that. Obviously, I've also had friends. You know, I always try and say this as honestly as possible. I'm not interested in this phenomenon of of seeing myself as a good person or a bad person. I am a person. You know, I have no self-righteous ideas of myself, and I'm sure that a series of decisions beyond the reality of my neurological chemical imbalance or whatever you want to call it, I'm sure I've made self-sabotaging decisions which have contributed to what the path I'm on now. I'm pretty sure that that's entirely possible. Having said that, I have there's a special place in my heart for friends of mine who have given me nothing but grace and compassion, and have chosen to see me for who I am in my being, in all its complexity, um, as opposed to a caricatured, myopic idea of who I may be. Um, and so that's been really beautiful. I think for me though, one thing I tried. I'm one of those people. I would much rather be inconvenienced than inconvenience somebody else if I really can, can help it. And I think that, yeah, the boring age old adage of being a burden is something that I really struggle with, of course. And for me, yeah, it's been a period ever since coming forward about my decision. It's been a period of new friendships and a consolidation of old ones, and for people just being holding space for my pain without trying to do too much.
Well, what if perhaps, okay, say you're an inconvenience to some people's lives, but now that you've opened this dialogue, people in your life and people in the world would much prefer you as a slight inconvenience as opposed to not being here at all.
I mean, it's a very poignant question, but you know what, David? Uh, I don't. I believe in the kindness of humanity. I believe that people have good intentions. I just feel as if um I find that it's very rare to find people, even if they deem themselves good people or with good intentions. I think that unfortunately we live in a state of late state capitalism and such opportunism that even when people want to be entirely good or entirely themselves, I don't know. I find that in my life, I I don't think I've met apart from maybe my mother, even with our imperfect relationship. I don't think I've met anyone in my life who has loved me without wanting or needing something from me. I don't think I know any relationship like that. I think even my best friend Illy, she's a wonderful human being. She's helped me and enabled me in so many ways as a person. She's funny, she's charismatic, she's charming, she's an amazing cook. We're hosting people at a gathering called Fucked Up Individuals every weekend starting from March. Oh, sorry about that.
That's our halftime buzzer. Ladies and gentlemen, this episode has been brought to you by Pfizer. Go on, I apologize.
But yeah, like even someone as amazing as her, I definitely, of course, understand the caveats that exist within our relationship and the dynamics that exist in that regard. It was mail, it was delivery.
Okay.
Yeah.
No halftime. Thank God it wasn't Pfizer. I don't want a part of that, but go on.
It's fine. But even but beyond our love for each other, Illy has a lovely husband, two doodles who are basically her children, and a cat called Satan, and that's her world. And I will never come, and obviously her first love is coffee, but really good coffee, but. And I fit somewhere on the spectrum, and I mean, it's not. I mean, obviously, yeah. That's what it should be. But my point is, at the end of the day, I find that relationships on this planet, even when they don't have to be, there's always a sense of a transactionality that ensues. And don't get me wrong, I do believe in the beauty of exchanging value. I never want to be the friend that is taking. I love this idea of being able to reciprocate and reciprocate and reciprocate so that it's mutual. But you see, even in the human joust of mutuality, there is still some element. I do think mutuality falls under transactional. And I think that unfortunately, what life has made me and the decisions it's made me take as a person is not because I'm intuitively interested in that. It's because life just puts you in that position.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm not saying in order for life to be worth living, I'm that I'm looking for this sort of unconditional, unwavering, love or affection, platonic or otherwise. But because I do to some extent agree with Whoopi Goldberg. The minute she said her mother died, she knew no one would love her in that way ever again. And I get it. I get it. We're complex. I just think that in all humility, speaking as a precocious 28-year-old dude who has seen more of life than they wish they did. With all the pseudo-intellectual knowledge I have, with all the mistakes I've made, with all the hurdles, I don't know if I'm interested in continuing to exist in that canon as a human being. I'm honestly not sure. Balanced with my chemical imbalance, but with my struggles in here, I don't know if that is interesting anymore to me. Quite frankly,
Mm-hmm. And so, what about your mother, though? Because if you're saying your mother is maybe the one person that would be giving you that love, and she's still around, what is that? What is
Unfortunately,
that like?
well, for better or for worse, my mother is. She will never see me, and what I mean by that is that my mother, fundamentally, in her heart of hearts, is somebody who abides by the word of God down to its Old Testament credentials, does believe that my sexuality is abominable. It's a very unimaginative, unoriginal point of view. I get it.
Yeah.
I understand where it comes from. We're West African, as worldly and as educated as she is. That's her stance. That's her view, despite its existence in several species. But again, the idea of us being human and superior, all those arguments I could have with myself on this on this podcast, but I won't. So and so she loves me unconditionally. I know she does, but even within that conditionality, there exists condition. And I don't know, and I don't know if that makes sense. Even I don't
No,
know if
that makes sense. I got introduced to something from one of my last episodes about this 7 layers of selflessness or something like that. And essentially it was like, there's like the first layer of just doing something complete. It seems selfless, but it's not. It's with an exchange, as you will, a transactional exchange. Then you go all the way to the top layer and it seems like the most selfless act possible, but every act is the question that, that philosophical question. Is there such thing as a selfless act? I'm not sure there is, but sometimes it's like, okay, yeah, we could harp on that. And I'm trying. I feel like I understand what you're saying, because every time someone does something good, I'm like, okay, was that truly selfless? And that does matter, that contemplation, of course. But at the same time,
it's the
like,
Mr. Beast argument. It's literally the Mr. Beast argument, right? In a way.
I know Mr. Beast, but what is the Mr. Beast argument?
Like, the most basic underlying query of if what he's doing is truly.
Right.
Yes, transforming communities in the global south and videoing it.
But he's making $50 million.
Exactly. And so even though he is actually making impact, and that impact is palpable, measurable, can be calibrated and validated, it is still to a larger proportion beneficial to him as well. Whatever way of the coin you see it, at the end of the day, and that isn't a bad thing. I think that that's just, what do adults say when they don't know what else to say? It is what it is. Yeah, it is what it is. That's why all conversations on capitalism. I always find that so funny. This is just a side comment. Um, um, Somebody asked me why there's a paywall to my Substack, for example, and I was like, guys, the CEO of Nestle said that water isn't a human right, okay, and there is a church in Spain which is selling property in heaven. My Substack paywall isn't a human right. No one needs to be going on my Substack.
Exactly.
No one. It's not compulsory. If I live in a world where it is what it is, and so creating value and spending time writing, to create some value, to get some value for that, um, um, even in my bid to create free awareness on my Instagram, which I do anyway, I shouldn't be punished, or queried for that. It sounds so silly, and I find this sort of like, when it comes to people, to again, that loud minorities, sort of inquisitions on that, I'm like, I find that sort of like selective outrage fatiguing. It's like, of all the people in this world to sort of query about the ethos of because my Substack is my story and my experience. No one has to read it if they don't want to. But insurance companies, not paying claims on burned down homes, that is a problem. Child labor avocado, that is a problem. Someone thinking that water isn't a human right, that is a problem. The American healthcare system, these are problems. Not my Substack about my insignificant little death when there are 60,000 people this year who have already gone. And so at the end of the day, I don't even know how I got into this rant, but at the end of the day, it is what it is. Like, I don't know if there is such a thing as an entirely selfless act, because of the way society has been designed.
Yeah, maybe that's okay.
Do I think that that's okay?
I'm just saying, but what if there's, because if we're talking about if I'm understanding correctly, what you're saying, there's more important issues and this, that, and the other. But can you say the same thing about your perspective in regards to like this idea that maybe you haven't felt this complete unconditional love, but there's maybe that 1 ounce of that is not full, is a little bit selfish, and maybe that is okay, but you're still getting this 99% of true, honest love.
Absolutely. I mean, I don't think it's a matter of whether it is or isn't okay. I think it has to be okay, because what else? What else exists?
I know that was rhetorical, but now you got me thinking.
Yeah, but it's true. But it's true. Like, what else? Like, it's an essay question. What else exists? Like, what does that look like? At the end of the day, because I mean, dare I say it, not to get biblical, haha, but even when Jesus, as iconoclast figure as he has become, wanted, like, I think when he was initially, he didn't want to die. I'm not going to be able to quote the hyper specific passages in the Bible where that happens, where he tries to avoid his fate with God. But there is a part in the Bible where Jesus initially didn't want to die. He didn't want to go through the pain. Even Jesus, and then sort of like in his obedience to his heavenly Father, etc., follows through with the bloodbath and is crucified, right? I mean, not to get quasi-blasphemous, because but was that entirely selfless? I mean, wasn't it also to sort of like honor and be deemed honorable by his heavenly Father, to some extent? And
yeah,
so
maybe it's the human flaw.
Argued, right? And so therefore, there was a tiny ounce of self-edification in doing this selfless act. And so ultimately speaking, no matter how, when you get to the crux of it, I don't know if anything else exists. I'm not saying anything else should. And I'm not saying that I'm not shitting on how humanity as far as contemporary anthropology, how we exist as people. It produces beautiful results most of the time. Some of the time, it does. It does, and that's incredible. I'm just saying that I wish I was less aware, and I wish I was a bit more stupid because I'll probably be happier.
I say that four times a week. Not that I'm the most brilliant person in the world, but I like to think I'm relatively smart. And I think I said it probably 24 hours ago. I was like, I think I looked up at the stars, like, man, I wish I was an idiot, because ignorance is bliss is a real thing. And once
It is.
but you got to dangle that. You got to, at the same time, you being the general you, it's like you sometimes have to counteract your own intellect and go the opposite direction, just to not go too deep, if that makes sense, because it can drive us down this rabbit hole of this esoteric thought process.
Exactly, because for two reasons. A, it's almost futile.
It is in many ways, yeah.
Yeah, because you're swallowing your tail. There's no reality beyond this one, and so if this is just what it is, which I've probably said too many times on this podcast, but don't you notice that it's such a my obsession. By the way, my obsession with that expression isn't irrational. My obsession with that expression is tied to the fact that it seems to be some sort of like mutual code for ending a conversation when we have hit the foundation of what all life stands for. But I just noticed that, unfortunately, it's normally associated with conversations to do with living in a capitalist society. Like, for example, as I spoke to the guy who's pursuing euthanasia, the tree surgeon, as a Dutch national, I'm a foreign national, and so I have to pay. I have to pay between like 10 to 15,000 euros to be killed, and to pursue the non-violent solution. That's how much it would cost me. The people who are putting me down non-violently, the doctors, aren't going to do it for free or for hugs and kisses. And so when we get to that point of capitalism, we both ended that conversation saying that, yeah, it is what it is.
Yeah, fuck. Yeah. No, I thought about that too. I was like, damn, it's a business. It's a business.
Death is a business.
Yeah, death. I mean, I'm not rolling in the dough right now, but I talk about death, and I want to make this my living, and it's not. And that you got me thinking earlier. I was like, when you're talking about your paywalls and whatnot, I was like, I've been doing this for free for so long. Money's coming in, it's cool, but I want to make more money doing this because I want to support myself, but I want to support myself in order to just do this. So it's like, yeah, you can look at it as completely not selfless because I want to make more money doing this, but the more money will allow me to do this. And that, it's like the yin and the yang and the seesaw of this whole entire thing.
Exactly. And if somebody wanted to be like, a reductive, mindless pundit, they could say that, yeah, you are capitalizing on the phenomenon of death. Like, even having me on the podcast could be deemed that way. But it's like, it is what it is. Like, ultimately speaking, this is a conversation. We're creating value. Hopefully people will learn from the value that's being created in our discussion. Hopefully. That's what we all hope. And unfortunately, we live in a society, in a world where resource mobilization exists and value exchange exists, and this idea of like people, having to like offer that for nothing, while the people who should be offering, the billionaires and the plutocrats who should be offering more, are sort of told that, yeah, they just really earned it, and the stock market did what it did, and 1 + 1 is 4. And compound interest is one of those wonders of the world. I mean, it's all BS. So, yeah, I think one thing that has struck me about the way I've chosen to be open and transparent about my journey is the weird use of the word promotion. When we have people suffering from drug injuries in the US because doctors are overprescribing depression medication, that's not seen as promotional or exploitative, but rather my silly Instagram page is seen as promotion, or people referring to, again, romanticization. There's so many movies and films with $1 million budgets that actually romanticize suicide and death. Again, my silicon screen of a phone and my voiceover is talking about my journey is not your problem. It's not the main issue here. So again, I think one thing that has fascinated me throughout this entire process over the past 6 weeks since opening up and breaking down on December 9th, where I showed a tiny snippet of my video diary about what a depressive episode looks like. I think what has surprised me the most has been like what I have deemed erroneously maybe neoliberal selective outrage. That sort of selective outrage that I think is a bit weird, because knowing fully well how the world works, you know.
Yeah, and that's the deep hole is once you start learning how the world really works, and it's a never-ending, limitless hole because the information just keeps coming in, and it takes you in a very, very strange place. And sometimes we need to hit that wall and just stop thinking about it, but it's nearly impossible. And there's one last thing I do want to ask you because I want to get your story out there first. The bureaucratic process of determining if you're eligible, is that the correct term? Like how does that process work, or what are you learning from the decision making on the back end?
I'm at the earliest stage of this process, which is gaining the support from a Euthanasia Knowledge Center. The one I'm using here is the Stitching Kia Foundation, and they will be able to help me find the um, resources, medical practitioners, and neurological care I need to go through the process. I don't want to like be hyper specific about the nuance of my process in general because it is, even though there's a prerequisite stage to go through which takes months and months and months. Um, I That's one thing that I don't want to necessarily make easy to access that information because um, I do think people should need to find that out for themselves and find what works for them. Knowing that non-violent euthanasia exists to exit this world due to chronic debilitating mental disorders is a good thing. Um, that is knowing that it exists is good. It exists in Colombia, exists in Canada. I think it's called MAID in Canada. Um, MAID. It exists in Switzerland and it exists in the Netherlands. I think knowing that it exists is a good thing. I think how people find the minutiae and the hyper-specific information shouldn't come from somebody who isn't an expert.
Right.
And mind you, haha, this is my first time doing this. So I'm not an expert. So my bid to do it does not make me an expert on it, which is why I've only introduced people to the first stage, which is going to a euthanasia knowledge center. But I am also learning about this process more and more every day as I go through it, obviously. And so, from that point of view, I don't want to fulfill the trope of being the blind leading the blind, and also want to say that simply sharing my story, having the responsibility of a platform, for better or for worse, does mean that that I should be mindful of how and when I choose to share the specificity of that information, and that just having a lot of followers doesn't mean that I know everything. So that's how I want to answer that question.
All right, well, Joseph, I appreciate it, man. And, I don't have, again, I came into this episode with nothing written down as I usually do. I just wanted to tell you that you have already left a mark in my life. And I think you're a light in this world from what I understand. And I know there's a lot of information I don't have on you or know the depth of you. But this last hour, I've gotten to know a little bit about you. And I believe you are a light in this world. And I hope that light doesn't dimmer anytime soon. But I hope this episode does get out here and at the absolute minimum helps other people. And I hope it continues to be a preventative measure in your case. And I respect the time you're giving me to be willing to share this. I'm grateful for the opportunity. It's such a pleasure to meet you. And I know I'm not going to be the only one that thinks that. And if there's anything I can do for you on and off the camera, just, you got a friend technically in Jersey right now, but I'll be in LA when I have to get back home at some point. But I'm very honored for the opportunity, and I hope this not only helps other people, but I hope it was of some value to you. You know what I mean? So if there's anything else you feel like you want to say before we get out of here, I just wanted to express my gratitude.
No, just to thank you for giving me a safe space to share what I've gone through and my journey, and also for also, as we've unironically discussed, using your platform to be able to shed light on these stories so that people can, I guess, evolve, grow, navigate their own lives and their own decisions. And yeah, and for actively indulging in sonder, as you've learned about my my journey and what goes on in my little head.
Yeah, I mean, I think your head is a lot bigger than you may think it is. I don't mean that in an egotistical way. You're clearly a very intelligent man, and I think you have a lot going for you. And I wish you the best with everything that you have going for you that people may not see outside of what you expressed. Because again, everyone's fighting a battle in a way that we often don't see. And, some may be more difficult than others, but at the same time, and the hardest thing we've ever gone through is the hardest thing we've ever gone through. So it's kind of relative in many ways. But I'm sending you much love, as much love as I can energetically send from however many miles Amsterdam is from the East Coast right now. And we'll definitely be in touch. But for everyone listening, am I pronouncing your name wrong? Is it Joseph Awuah-Darko? How am I pronouncing your name correctly?
Yeah, it's either Awuah-Darko or Awuah-Darko. It's fine. Either way, it's okay.
Either one. Do you have an ambidextrous last name? What do you prefer?
I prefer Awuah-Darko.
Okay, Joseph Awuah-Darko.
Much more Ghanaian, yeah.
All right, beautiful. Well, I mean, your name and your story is going to echo in time, regardless whether you want that or not. So I'm grateful for the opportunity, and I appreciate that. And for anyone listening, I'll put all his information in the show notes if you want to find more of his story or potentially reach out. That's up to him if he wants to answer you. But hopefully, this for anyone listening, whether you're whatever side of the circle you're on, whether you're in a tough place or someone in a tough place, hopefully this offered some insight in some capacity. And I want to thank you all, as usual, for listening and send some love to Joseph. So another episode of Dead Talks. Until next time. Thank you so much for tuning in to another episode of Dead Talks. Please do not forget to hit the subscribe button and also the notification bell. That'll give you updates as to when we post a new video, more episodes, and more content in general. We are streaming on all the major podcast platforms, including Apple, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Pandora, and all that. And also find us on Instagram at Dead Talks Podcast or www.deadtalks.net. Thank you so much.